If you heard of someone reading Green Eggs and Ham for 21 hours on end, you'd probably think of a kindergarten teacher with a very poor lesson plan. Instead, that was the 2013 US Senate, when Ted Cruz spoke for 21 hours to stop the passing of an Obamacare bill, a process infamously known as the filibuster, wherein a senator can essentially talk a bill to death by preventing a vote from even being reached. As the Democracy Docket explained in a November article, in the last year alone, Republicans have used the process to kill voting rights legislation 5 times over. This is, of course, something that Democrats are equally guilty of whenever they're in the minority. Now, in situations like these, which over the past year have led to many Americans suggesting that we get rid of the filibuster entirely, with, of course, others suggesting more moderate routes. Nonetheless, consider that the filibuster inherently prevents the majority from passing legislation even when they technically should have enough votes. It's clear that it currently stands as the biggest roadblock to legislative progress, making it a matter of national significance that we ask today's question. Should the US get rid of or reform the filibuster? And the answer is we should be moving toward reform. First, because total removal is simply unworkable. Second, however, as it stands, the filibuster is far too easy. And finally, the correct reforms could enshrine the values that our nation was built on. Total removal of the filibuster is often referred to as the nuclear option because it's very dangerous, bringing us to the first reason why we shouldn't be looking toward removal but instead reform, and that the total removal option is simply unworkable. The Washington Post explained in a May 22nd article, if Democrats today were to pass a removal of the filibuster, they'd probably immediately use it to pass things like abortion protections, voting rights, progressive green energy bills, knowing that they no longer have to worry about Republicans. The reason why this is dangerous, however, is because it goes both ways. With the November midterm elections approaching quickly, and Republicans having a very real shot of retaking both houses of Congress, it means that a move like this for the Democrats could bite them and America in the back, as The Guardian elaborated on May 30th of this year. We see Republican leader Mitch McConnell recently announcing that should Roe v. Wade be overturned, just like Supreme Court leads suggest, Republicans could move forward with a nationwide bill banning abortion. And just like it would only take 50 Democrats to enshrine abortion, it would only take 50 Republicans to do away with it for good. Essentially, it's clear that removing the filibuster entirely is not only a rash move, but one that only suggests a flipping and back and forth that allows the majority party to completely move toward the extremes of legislation while the other party is powerless. And as the American Constitution Center explained in an April 13th article, the filibuster has been around for hundreds of years and undergone relatively little change. Its strength is in its precedent, and the nuclear option completely removes that. Since 1917, there have been more than 2,000 filibusters enacted, and more than half of them have come just in the last decade, bringing us to the second reason why we should be instead moving toward reform, and that the filibuster as it stands is far too easy to use. As an article published by the US Senate just last month explains, currently in order to vote for cloture, or that 60-vote threshold to end a filibuster, we base it off of the duly chosen and sworn rule, essentially suggesting that all senators, whether or not they're actually present in Congress, have to vote in order to end debate. That's led to several bizarre situations, like last year when we saw a bill to end commission pass 55 to 35 in the Senate, with 10 Republicans completely avoiding the vote, but they still couldn't get into the cloture because they couldn't reach that 60-vote threshold. That's why, as the Political Organization for Governmental Oversight explained in an article published just 2 weeks ago, we should be moving toward reforms that look toward proportionality for that cloture vote. Essentially, in that situation, we would only need 56 votes to overcome cloture in order to match the proportion of the senators actually voting. This does a few major things for the filibuster process. First, it completely de-incentivizes its use because instead of senators being able to sit back in their homes and do nothing, they have to actually be present. But second of all, it completely publicizes the process. As an article from Roll Call concluded for us on April 10th of this year, many senators right now are able to eschew accountability because no one actually knows what their votes are. But by requiring votes to come from only those who are actually present in Congress, it allows the American people to hold them accountable to the filibuster process, thereby once again de-incentivizing its use and making its total use all the more valuable. But time and time again, we've seen that the filibuster's current state is backward to American democracy, bringing us to the final reason why we should be looking toward meaningful reform, and that it allows us to enshrine our nation's most important values. As the Brennan Center for Justice explained in an April 15th article, we famously saw Senator Strom Thurmond in 1957 use the filibuster for 24 hours to stop the passing of the 1957 Civil Rights Act. Actions like these have led former President Obama to refer to the filibuster as a relic of the Jim Crow era. But again, we can see that further reforms allow the filibuster to exist, but maintain the US's most important values. For example, as an article from The Hill pointed out on June 1st of this year, another reform that we could be looking toward is essentially carving out certain legislation, like legislation regarding abortion or voting rights or civil rights in general, that make it immune to the filibuster. A similar process that we saw that currently makes it so you can't filibuster any presidential appointment or Supreme Court nomination. It's steps like these that would allow the United States to make these values that we worked so hard to get impossible to deter, while at the same time allowing Congress to maintain the filibuster and the precedent that we've seen over the last century. So, in returning to today's question, should the US get rid of or reform the filibuster? The answer is we should be moving toward reform. First, because total removal is simply unworkable. Second, however, as it stands, the filibuster is simply far too easy to use. And finally, correct reforms could mean that we make our nation's most important values harder to touch. So hopefully, the next time we see someone reading Green Eggs and Ham for 21 hours on end, it'll stay in the classroom.